Okay, we just finished the second example in the first directory. We just finished AJAX basics. We're going to move on to the second directory, AJAX, and we're going to open up index.html. Okay, that's the basic concepts for AJAX request, but we can make it a little bit shorter and we can actually see a real-world example. So in this example, let's load it up. I'm going to go back a directory. I'm going to open up number 2, AJAX. You'll see here I have a system, an app, where they're going to click on a button and it's going to pull back an Einstein quote. So when they click on quote 1, it's going to pull back quote 1. You'll see I have 5 buttons here. I have 5 buttons, and it's going to call update info, and it's going to send the quote ID. So let's write the code for this. Okay, it's going to call an update info function, so I need to create that. So I'll create the update info function. It's going to take a parameter. We're going to call it quote ID. Let's say capital ID there. And basically we do the same. But this one will be a little bit shorter, and I'll show you how we can make it shorter. If I set up my AJAX object, so I need to create a new object. This is going to be an XML HTTP request. And before I looked for the on ready state change, and I have to make sure it's equal to 4. They also have, in most browsers, they have what's called an on load. So it's going to already wait for the ready state equal to 4. But in this on load, I'll still check for the status to equal 200. Okay, make sure no bugs happen with the server or the server didn't crash. But you'll see it's a little bit shorter than what I had before. And then based off the info box, okay, so I'll document that get element by ID. I'll grab the info box and I'll change the inner HTML to whatever quote I received from the server, which is going to be a response text. Okay, so this is much shorter than what we had before, which is right here. Had to check for ready state equal to 4 and status equal to 200. If I do on load, I just need to check for the status equal to 200 because it's going to wait for the server to finish loading. But I haven't sent the data. So I need to actually send some data to the server this time. Whereas before we just got whatever text came back. So I'm going to make a request URL. I'm going to send this to a file called updateinfo.php, and I'm going to do it as a GET request. So remember, with the GET request, I use a question mark. That shows that the GET request has started. And then I'll do, let's say, info ID, lowercase d there, equal to whatever parameter, quote ID, that they sent. So let's see, this is a lowercase d, this is a capital D. Let's change this to a lowercase d so it's the same. Now I'll open up the AJAX request using a GET. I'm going to use a GET request. I'm going to send the request URL, and I'm going to make sure it's asynchronous, and I'll go ahead and send the AJAX request. Now I could have put the request URL here without creating a variable, but I just want you to see this GET request very clearly. So I'm going to make a GET request to updateinfo.php. GET requests are sent in the URL. So I put a question mark that starts the GET request, followed by key value pairs. So my key is info ID. The value is whatever parameter sent, depending on which button they click. Okay, so here's my AJAX request. Let's update the code on the server. Refresh the page. Okay, now I've clicked on quote 1. You'll see it sends back quote 1. Click on quote 2. Sends back a different quote, quote 3, quote 4, and quote 5. Now, let's open up the PHP code. So if I open up updateinfo.php, which is right here, you'll see, and this is similar to the challenge, depending on what you send me in the GET request, okay, if the Get request is empty, I'm going to default to quote 0. Otherwise, I'm going to actually get the data you sent. So if they send quote 1, I'll send this back. If they send quote 2, I'll send this back. If they send quote 4, I'll send this back. Anything besides quote 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to send this back. Okay, and then I send it back by just printing. I print back a string because it's waiting for a response text. So it's waiting for a string. So depending on what you send me, I'm going to send back a different quote. And then that quote's going to be received right here in the response text. And I'm going to update the info box, which is this box right here. Okay, so this is a perfect example of an AJAX request. Sending data to the server and getting back a particular quote. Now this server code is hard-coded with 4 or 5 quotes. Usually I'll get the data from this get super global array, and then I'll link it to the database. So I'll do a select from the database and then grab a quote. But this is a good example so you can see what the server does. But usually I'll connect to a database, do a select query from the database, and then return those results to the interface, which will then update the info box. Okay, but this is still a good example to see a real-world application for an AJAX request. Continue to the next video for the next coding example.